Hey guys, welcome into the maiden voyage of a series we like to take a topic and ask, what if? Join us right now, we have Chaz Day, I'm Brock Young, and join us all the way from Darwin, Australia, Mr. Tyson McQuinn. Today's topic is a good one. What if Lewis Hamilton was placed into another vehicle? Can he win championships? Can he still win races? Right now we're going to discuss pop him into a McLaren Mercedes. Chaz, what do you think about that as your Mercedes guy? Lewis Hamilton fan, can he first off win championships in this McLaren Mercedes?
Interesting question. So I got a question for you. So are we talking about, is there a timeline on this or um,
Today,
uh, like this season?
this season right now,
Okay.
can he win a championship?
In a McLaren.
Yes.
In a word, no. No. And here's what I think is like really important to kind of just think about and consider. Think about the driver compared to what the car is capable of. There's just kind of those two factors that are always at play. I think that obviously Lewis is one of those drivers that is going to outperform any car that he's in. We've also seen McLaren drivers outperform their car, and some have not. But yeah, I think the McLaren car today has its limitations.
Mm.
Um, but probably I would imagine it's probably the chassis. Obviously, it's grown a lot in the last few years, but I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think that he's capable of outperforming the car. Um, Also because you have to think of all the other cars that you would have to beat. You'd still have to beat whoever's in that current Mercedes, and you would have to beat Red Bull.
That's very true, but also Lando Norris is proving right now that he is pushing that McLaren um, into a state that, yes, they were P3 last season in the championships, but also one Ferrari's given a fight. But it is roughly the same as you point out earlier on another show we have. Um, McLaren changed out their engine mid last season, mid 2020s, so they had a little more of experience with this engine compared to others. But I think he still could win races. I don't know if he can win championships now. That's a question for you, Tyson. Can he win championships in that McLaren?
Um, I don't think he could, considering he have two powerful teams in Red Bull and Mercedes. So that'd be pretty difficult to get past. You've even got Ferrari is putting in not too bad of a performance this season, and that McLaren car, yeah, I don't think it's up to his sort of standard for racing. So I don't think he'll be able to win a championship in that McLaren.
Yeah, to Tyson's point, I mean, if he's complaining about the Mercedes car, imagine what he would be complaining about in a McLaren. Not, I mean, not to crap on the McLaren. It's they've made massive strides in really the last 3 years. I mean, it's like it's not even the same car. It's obviously it's a new engine manufacturer and all that, but still, like the engineering team has done a phenomenal job. So it's not a new car, but I just I agree with Tyson. Like it's not up to his spec for as a driver. He'd have a really tough time.
Well, how about this, Tyson? Can he, out of 23 race season, can he still win races? And how many, for that matter?
Uh, I think he's got a good chance at winning races. We can see that McLaren can get podiums with that car. We saw yesterday Lando getting the podium at Monaco. I think he'd be able to win races, but probably not a whole season. Although Lewis has won in a McLaren before 2008, but it's a completely different car since then. It's been 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it would be feasible to win a season, but a few races here and there would be fully in his range.
How about you, Chaz?
Yeah, I think he could definitely pull out some races. I think effectively it would wind up being kind of like a maybe like a I'm trying to think of who's been like consistent enough this season to even be like a good example of I think he would get a lot of fourths and fifths, probably a lot of fourths, um, a good amount of podiums, a fair bit of podiums, and he would win maybe 2 3 races. But again, the limitations definitely not the driver. It'd just be the car, but not a whole season though. I mean, there's just too much firepower. I mean, you're already like whoever gets that other seat in Mercedes would be in good shape. Um, depending on how composed they are, and and then you're fighting a Verstappen in a Red Bull. I mean, that's a tough battle when you're in a Mercedes.
Well, let's change it up a little bit here, and the Aston Martin. It is the same engine, same chassis, same everything as last year's championship Mercedes. Can he win that in a championship in that McLaren? I'm sorry, in that Aston Martin there, Chaz.
Yeah, I mean, so is it the entire car or is it just the engine from last year?
The entire car. In fact, you get the team with it. Honestly,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so much of racing is. I know we talk about it often that there's different components of racing, right? Like there's the driver, um, there's the strategy, and then there's the engineering.
mm-hmm.
Such a huge part of it is the engineering, right? Like, and Lewis is so involved in the feedback loop of after a race going back and giving them feedback, but you also have to have engineers that are capable of executing on that feedback. I'm sure every single week Williams is coming back with feedback, right? Like every single week. So if the measure of the improvement was simply getting feedback or being able to give feedback, every team would get measurably better each week. I just don't think that that's the case with every team. You still have to have an engineering team that's capable of executing on it, and so um, yeah, it's yes, I do think that he would do well even in last year's Mercedes. Um, However, you still have to have an engineering team that's capable of pulling it off, and no one's engineering team is Mercedes.
Well, this is true. I mean, you got, and you point this out, Chaz, too, that Toto Wolff is probably better at his job than Lewis Hamilton is at his. So you have already a championship winning formula with Mercedes. Now, Lawrence Stroll is trying that over that Aston Martin, but we've seen complaints after complaints so far in Aston Martin. You've seen them even at this point in the 2021 season trying to not sue, but bring the FIA and F1 to court over their rake in the back. So with that type of attitude, and it all boils down to attitude as well. How well the driver gets along with the team itself. Now, Tyson, with all that said, can Lewis Hamilton win a championship in the Aston Martin from the season?
Definitely not, because it's you can see from the results this season, not counting Monaco, of course, because Monaco is a you win in qualifying situation, but you can see from the results like Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, comes into that car and is persistently finishing outside of the points. And Lance Stroll finishing just like barely in the top 10. Two races, the first two races of the season, he was in 10th and 8th, and then the Portugal and Spain, he was in 14th and 11th, respectively. So, to put it simply, he could definitely not get a championship in that car.
Well, Tyson, how many races can he win in that car this season?
Not a single race. I He wouldn't win a single race unless there was a pile up at the start. No, Hamilton.
Oh.
You know, that's what Chaz usually tells Mike whenever he picks Williams to win a race. So unless like there's a pile up that happens, there's no way George Russell or Nicholas Latifi could make it into the points. But
yeah.
Chaz, what do you think about that? How many races can Lewis Hamilton win in that Aston Martin?
Yeah, I think he would. Well, not I think he would consistently score points, right? So
Yeah.
that would be a win for the Aston Martin team. They would move up perhaps in the constructors standing. So I mean, he would be a massive value add to any team that he went to if he should decide to go to some really third tier team for I don't know. I was gonna say a cash grab, but like it wouldn't really be a cash grab because there's not really a team that's even capable of paying him more. I don't think. Well, maybe Ferrari, they might be. They actually have the cash and they might be willing to pay him. But that being said, yeah, I mean he'd finish in the points. If he got a podium, we would all be super excited about it. We'd be like, that is amazing. Like this guy is great. But that would be the best that he would do. It would be maybe a podium. There's there's like 0% chance that he would win a race.
Now we're going to something that's probably a little harder or a little bit easier, depending on how you take it. Is what if Lewis Hamilton was placed in the Williams this season? Can he win championships? Can he win races? How about that, Chaz?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I heard the question correctly. Could he win a? Could he
If
win?
he's in a Williams,
Could he finish a race in a
can he
Williams?
finish a race? Well, I mean, George Russell and Nicholas Latifi has both proven they could finish a race, but not in points.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bar just changes, right? With whatever the team is. So, in the same way that like if he, had a third place finish because it was raining and, people's other teams slid off and like it just in that Aston Martin, if that happened, we'd be like, oh my gosh, like that's good for them. That's really cool. It wouldn't make any difference in like the actual constructor standing for the most part. It wouldn't change anything material, but the same thing is true here. Like the bar just changes. So, if we would be praising him for finishing in the points instead of possible top. Instead of top 5, we'd be praising him for finishing top 10 if he was in a Williams.
How about that, Tyson? Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I'd have to say I agree with that. Yeah, he wouldn't finish. He wouldn't finish in the points frequently enough, or he'd finish in 9th or 10th. He wouldn't get anywhere past 9th.
Well, how about this, guys? Tyson, to you first. Outside of Mercedes or Red Bull, if you look at any other team on the grid, can he win a championship?
No, I don't think outside of those two teams, except maybe maybe in a McLaren, but there'd have to be a lot of issues with the Mercedes and the Red Bull, of course. But I don't see any car outside of those two winning.
Wait, what other car did you say, Tyson? I missed it.
M- Maybe a McLaren,
McLaren.
but I you can see that new drivers don't perform well in that car. You can see it with Ricardo. He hasn't performed to the level we expect him to.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you, Chaz?
Um, I what's interesting is that like just the dynamic that exists, that like driver engineering team relationship. I think that so here was my question: is the scenario this actual season, so some like crazy active, like Zeus or something, like where Lewis would go to another team in this season, like he would race next race in another car, or is it from the beginning of this season?
Mainly from the beginning of this season. Let's take both those questions, honestly.
I do think that they're different. I do think they're different. So like I think if it was from the beginning of this season where they have preseason, they have testing, and they're able to get a lot of feedback, I do think that Lewis is actually great even off the grid. I mean, you have to be great at communicating what's going on in the car and really understanding it in order to give that good feedback, right? So I do think that if they had preseason and testing, it would make a significant difference in if he was able to spend that time with McLaren. Um, that mid-season, if they pulled an Alex Albon and like Alex Albon to another team, right? Like it did a mid-season change like that. I think it would, Verstappen would just win. That's the only thing that would change. But yeah, I think it just depends on when the season. Now, would he actually win in a McLaren from the beginning of the season? Again, I think it's super. It's just simple physics. Like you still have to beat Verstappen in a Red Bull.
Well, that's a good point too. But going forward, I mean, many of these, even these constructors, don't even know what kind of engine is coming forward here in the 2022 season. So it's kind of hard, but it's fun to speculate. What if? That's why we do. That's why we do this here. But Tyson, that brings up a good point. Going into the future, if he goes into like a McLaren in 2022, can he still win a championship? I mean, being with that team from the very beginning, developing that car from the very beginning, the engine, chassis, and stuff like that, giving them feedback. Can he win in
Um,
2020?
I think he could win races. I don't think he'd be able to win the constructors championship. Oh, not constructors, the drivers championship. Um, I think that'd just be sort of giving it to Max to win because he's been in that car for 6, 7 years now. He'd be able to. He's been with the same team all that time. I don't think Hamilton would win. I think it'd be Verstappen.
That actually brings up an interesting. I think like is there I'm kind of thinking about what Tyson just said around like, okay, if he was to go to another team, it would just give it to Verstappen because Verstappen's had so much time with Red Bull, right? And they'd have to any team that Lewis went to would have to develop that rapport, develop the new car, and kind of work on it. So, is there any scenario where he would go to another team and it makes sense for him? So, I guess the real question is like, is there a scenario where it would make sense for him? Maybe not like make sense for the team, but drivers have different motivations, right? Like, reasons why they do things, i.e., Ricardo. Like, I mean, should he have stayed in Red Bull? I think I think that part's pretty clear, but like drivers have different motivations. So is there a scenario where Hamilton might be motivated to test out a different team, considering his 1 year contract?
That's a good point. I mean, we probably talk about that later on in another series or another episode of what if Daniel Ricciardo stayed with Red Bull? What happened then? But that's actually an interesting point that you made, Tyson, too, is like about Max. And it's said before, it's all depending on the chassis, engine, the team that they surround themselves with. I mean, Bottas signed for 2022 for Mercedes. Lewis is still out there. We don't know what's going on. By God, we love it. we love this, all depending what new engine, what new power unit comes out in 2022.
Hey Tyson, do you think that there's a team that could tempt Lewis?
No, I don't think there is. I think Lewis knows that there's not a team that would be up to his standard, and I think he's just after Mercedes don't want him, he's just going to retire. He's done everything in the sport. I think he's just going to head out after he's done with Mercedes.
I agree with that too. Chaz, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I just don't know, man. I mean, I feel that way. I also feel like he's done everything, but also I feel like the music that he made was terrible, right? And yet he did it.
Well, I mean, if there is a scenario in that he may go back home to McLaren like Alonso did with Renault and Alpine, but if that's a what-if situation, if he had the choice of going to any other team, I think he would return home to McLaren. But Lando Norris already signed a contract extension, and Ricciardo already in there for a couple more years too. So that's a tight fit.
Well, wait, are you suggesting that there wouldn't be room for him? I mean, he anywhere he wants to go.
Well, I'm talking about McLaren itself. If he had a choice, I mean, I think he would return home to McLaren, but I mean, both drivers already signed up for a couple more years.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I don't think that's I don't think that's a problem. The contract is not the problem for sure. if Lewis said, "Hey, I'm interested in coming to McLaren," they would conveniently find a way to get rid of Ricciardo.
What do you think about that, there, Tyson?
Yeah, if Hamilton wanted to go to McLaren, McLaren would find a space for him, and that would be meaning getting rid of Ricciardo. But I don't see that happening. If Ricciardo continues on the form he's currently going, like the trajectory, I'd see him out by the end of next year. But if not, he'd probably stay in that team till his contract expires, and then I think Ricciardo will retire. But yeah, Lewis will get into a team if he wants to, but I don't think Lewis will. I think Lewis will just retire after Mercedes is done with him.
Yeah, and you're probably right because he's a super competitive guy. He is still motivated to win, right? Like, I mean, no one who performs at that high level for that long, doesn't have an intense level of self motivation that he's intrinsically working with. So I agree that it's extremely unlikely that he would go anywhere else, if not simply for the fact that he wouldn't win anywhere else.
Well, that was very interesting, guys. That was a very unique take. Love it. Love every minute of this. And by the way, if you have a topic for us to cover, theformofracing@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter as well as Facebook @formofracing. And We'll see if we come up with any more topics in the future here. But in the meantime, check out our other videos on the F1 starting grid, as well as like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time right here on TFR's What If Series.